Hey, David.
Hello. How are you?
Okay, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, hey, happy to do it.
It's awesome. And just based on your last email, I'm sorry to hear about your loss of your good friend Sonny Osborne, and
Yeah,
just want to send along my condolences. I'm sure in
well,
the in that industry or your particular genre, it must be a huge deal because obviously it's not a massive sort of mainstream thing. So
it really is. Yeah, I mean, just one of the what do you call it, cornerstone people
mm,
in that music. If you were to make a list of 10 bands, they would be definitely within the 10, probably within the first three
wow.
of important people. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But
Okay.
we all, I mean, the whole community at large lost him. But I, like a few other people, actually did get to know him and spend some time with him. And yeah, it's. But he'd had a couple of strokes. It was not completely unexpected, but still.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, sorry for your
Yeah,
loss. I'm sending my
yeah,
condolences to you and the entire
sure,
community.
right,
And obviously, healing is a big part of this process, which is what music is for as well. So again,
sure,
thank you so much, Sandy, for taking the time today. It's been awesome over the
pleasure.
last, yearish. You're first sending me an email about pitch and just sort of our relate towards a show I uploaded on my YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
You randomly sent me an email saying the pitch is wrong on this. We need to make an
Oh,
adjustment.
oh, you mean the musical pitch?
Yes, correct. And like
Oh,
it was too
I
fast.
forgot.
That's okay. I'm here
Yeah,
to remind. And so that sort of started this entire, relationship, at least for me. I mean,
yeah.
in you and your connection to Jerry and sort of what I do, it's just been
Mm.
amazing that because you kind of reached out to me initially for something that you had a concern with. And then, from there, we've exchanged emails over the year or so, whatever, during the pandemic. And it's
Mm.
been fun. It's been interesting for me because, again, I mean, I'm a nice Jewish boy from Toronto, and you're originally a nice Jewish boy from Miami, and it was just,
More or
and
less, more or less from Oakland, but originally Miami. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah. And
yeah.
so just, initially that's just really cool. And the connection of Jerry and whatnot. So I start most of my conversations off, and I call them conversations because I don't really like, I'm not an interviewer. I would rather just talk
Yeah.
and, let's shoot the shit,
Conversation
have
is
some
good.
fun. Exactly.
Conversation is good.
And
Yeah,
just, conversation is spelled with a Kahn, as in John Conversation.
that's a good one. I like that.
I try to always bring, we try to, in the community online, we try to bring, we call them conisms. And
That's
because my,
that that's extremely good in his case too, because he was, if you knew much about him or knew him at all, he was an extremely voluble conversationalist, conversationalist.
there
He
you
was
go.
great.
And so
One of the funniest guys you could ever meet.
I wish I had. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because he was also adopted by a Jewish family. Look at that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He was, I'll tell you a little anecdote, as
Please.
Barry used to call him. Oh, we're not on yet?
No, we're on.
Oh,
Go,
okay.
please,
Okay.
please. We've been on since you
Uh,
got on, sir.
John was, Marilyn Monroe was John's babysitter.
Yeah, yes,
You've heard that? Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Well, it's actually interesting because when I spoke with Dennis the very first time,
Hmm.
actually before that actual conversation, Dennis and I chatted a few times about some other projects, and it
Right.
came up, and he mentioned that I think it was 1978, that JGB tour specifically, where
Okay.
Jerry was sort of like playing marriage counselor, and Jerry called it the marriage counseling tour because he had Con and Maria and Donna and Keith sort of having some not marital issues, but and they
Hmm.
kept going to Jerry with their issues. And I found that to be a really kind of funny little anecdote about that, about, all of a sudden
Yeah.
Jerry's the guy, but now he's the marriage counselor because he's in the middle of everybody. And I just found that to be really funny.
That's pretty funny. I hadn't heard that. But
Yeah.
he was a counselor kind of a person because he was a mediator, kind of he could mediate anything, basically. He
That's
was a
really
good person to get advice from. And
yeah.
yeah,
Well, we're gonna dive that in a few minutes, but
yeah,
I always ask people the same question initially because I do kind of have
sure,
a format, not that I really stick to it sometimes.
sure.
But
That's all right.
have you ever been to a Grateful Dead show?
Yes,
And what was
yes.
okay? So what was your first show, and how was that
Oh,
experience for you, regardless of your history? Just depending upon the year, it could have been a whole weird experience. You know what I'm saying?
well, it's very hard for me to remember the first show. Um,
Ballpark.
Gosh, you know, I went to I went to a couple things that were real early on, like one of those Golden Gate Park things, you know.
Yeah.
But a show, inside show, might have been, first one might have been Henry Kaiser Christmas of 77 or 8.
So you got the right. We're in the good years, right? When everything was
Oh yeah,
taking off.
I didn't know that at the time. You know, I mean, they were all this. It was all the same to me. The thing about me and the Grateful Dead music is that I really I've never really knew much about it. I used to go, if I was at those shows. For one thing, I hardly ever went out in the audience. I usually could get backstage, and I would
Sure.
position myself behind somewhere near Jerry's amp, because I was a Jerry head, you know.
Yeah.
I was just tuned into. I wanted to hear everything he was doing real clear, and I often did that to the expense of really learning what song they were playing. You know, everybody else knew by the second note. Everybody around me knew. You know, certainly everybody in the audience and everybody I know who's a Deadhead now or a collector, they can recognize the song in one note or two, right?
Yeah.
Which, like I can do with bluegrass recordings, pretty much a lot
Of course.
them. But those are recordings. This is live. But I was sort of blissfully unaware of what the songs were really all about, and it's really been since after Jerry's passing that I've gotten into it and really tried to listen a lot and learn a lot. And I'm to be honest with you, completely blown away by how, for one thing, all the Deadhead people know this stuff, and it's complex music. It's not simple, easy stuff, you know. And I'm blown away by that, because I've spent my whole life on simple, easy stuff, basically, you know, musically, pretty easy stuff, really, compared to Grateful Dead music.
Sure.
So I'm learning a whole lot, and I've been, you know, I have a friend who's a collector. He's probably got, well, not probably, he's Rick Young. He's got every show. He's got the wall. I mean, he's got the vault in his house and has for many years. And he's been turning me on to stuff. If I go over there and visit, you know, I'll have to say, because he's picked out something great to play, and I'll say, does that sounds like 77? Maybe he'll have the date. You know, he'll know exactly what
Of course.
it is.
That's awesome. And thank you for saying that part, because that's a good segue for, that's sort of why, in a way, I created Jerry Church. I mean, well, where Jerry Church evolved or came from was, everyone knows the Grateful Dead. Everyone is so engulfed in that, and you said they can call it. I mean, that's part of the fun of going to a show, is trying to call the next song when you hear it, or even before it even starts. I mean, that's part of the fun. And you get it right, you're excited. You get it wrong, who cares? You just move on and you enjoy it. But I knew there was so much Jerry stuff potential that people didn't know about and hadn't heard. And to your point about being, we call ourselves Jerry holics on my channel, because, you know, we're just so engulfed and so enamored with, you know, his ability to bend strings and bend notes and bend emotion in either very a quick moment or a slow moment, whatever it may be. And that's sort of, you know, when I started doing this, I didn't know I was ever going to speak to people. I mean, Dennis just kind of came out of nowhere. He originally wanted me to speak with Donna, and it didn't work out. So I said, hey, how about you? And then from there, it just kind of kept going. And, you know, speaking with Merle's son, Tony, was really enlightening, because, again, he's been there as a child growing up in it. So totally different perspective. And that made me kind of think, you know what, maybe I need to go, not, I always say I can't go to Jerry directly, but I need to, you know, I want to skirt those edges and hear the stories of real people. But that's exactly it. But outside of that, I want to get more on you for a minute, about, you know, sort of like what drew you to bluegrass. You know you mandolin, dobro, and banjo mostly. But where did that initial, more you can tell me, absolutely. I mean, very limited information I could find online, but what drew you to that genre, to that, you know, to that music per se?
You know, that's always a hard question. It kind of goes to what you were saying at the very beginning. How did a nice Jewish boy from Oakland get started playing Appalachian music, or for that matter, Garcia, you know? I mean, but he was really into it way much earlier than me, and not only into it, but into the roots of it more. He was an expert at old time music before he even got into bluegrass, you know, which wasn't true for me. And my first thing was guitar, by the way. I started on guitar, and that's what I always played with Jerry. But the answer to that question is a tough one. You know, back in those days, the whole thing going on, as you know, all around the country, there were these little pockets of folk communities, folk music people, you know, and all that. I mean, Palo Alto had theirs. That's about a little less than 50 miles from where I was in Berkeley or Oakland. So, and then Berkeley had its folk scene. San Francisco, and then, you know, Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, and then across the country, you know, and there were these pockets everywhere. So the pocket I was in was the Berkeley one, basically, and I was looking at folk stuff, basically, and blues. You know, Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry were here all the time. Jesse Fuller lived in Oakland, and I went to visit him when I was about 14. One time I was a big Jesse Fuller fan. I still am. Totally crazy about Jesse Fuller, and most people don't even know Jesse Fuller. They know Deadheads do because of a couple of songs.
Yes.
And the world actually does, but they don't know it because everybody knows San Francisco Bay Blues, usually by Paul McCartney or Bob Dylan or somebody like that. That's Jesse's song, you know, and I was really into that and into this and that and pockets of this and blues and folk, and I gradually started hearing stuff that was more country oriented or more Appalachian old time oriented. There was a shop in Berkeley called The Barrel. Barry Olivier had a shop called The Barrel, which later became Campus Music Shop. Campbell Code took it over, and that's where I met Jerry, in Campus Music Shop. But Campbell was an important person because he had Bluegrass records in the shop, and I bought my first Bluegrass records there, you know. And he was more of a country and western and jazz guitar player, but he knew all about bluegrass, and he would turn me on to things. And then Jerry, after I met Jerry, he turned me on to. Jerry was the ultimate turner oner of everybody, of everything. You know, here, listen to this, you know, and all that. And he had been fed by a guy named Brooks Otis, who was in Palo Alto, in those days called Adams Otis, which was his middle name. And Brooks was the main feeder of bluegrass to Jerry. Brooks had been in the service with Roland White, who was part of what later became the Kentucky Colonels, a pretty important band for Jerry in particular. And Brooks knew a whole lot, and he was turning Jerry on. Jerry just, you know, gobbled everything up, of course. And he was already had, he and Marsh Lester, you know the name, had already, you know, explored a lot of old time music, a whole lot of mountain stuff, you know, and guitar, banjo and fiddle and everything. Jerry played fiddle. I mean, if you know that or not.
Yes, absolutely. Briefly, I didn't know enough about it, but I mean that got you to helpfully bridge that gap, and that's a good segue, because I mean that's the point. I mean you mentioned in the email, obviously, with the Osborne brothers, and that was one of the first, you know, things you saw with Jerry in your car trip, which I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear more about that. But also,
that's a long story. They were the first thing we saw. Yeah.
But I also know you played bluegrass with Garcia and David Nelson, the Black Mountain Boys, in '64. So right. Which kind of came first? Was it more you guys were already playing the music, or was it still kind of exploratory with Jerry, like you said, in that car trip kind of thing? Where was that kind of evolution at that point?
Oh, yeah. No, we were already way into it by the time we took the car trip. Yeah. They'd been way into it before I wasn't even aware of, you know, even it's only 44 miles down there to Palo Alto, but I didn't know what was going on down there. You know, I heard Jerry there was this KPFA radio Midnight Special. You've heard of that?
Yeah.
I think Phil Lesh had something to do with that along in the early days. I think I heard Jerry there the first time, but I think he was playing 12-string guitar. You know, this guy, I never saw him, and he told me once he may have heard me and Rick Shub there. He may have heard we heard him, he heard us on the radio, but we hadn't met yet. You know, but yes, the answer to your question, we're all the way had dived deeply into. But what the reason for the trip was that I'd gone east the year before. Drove out to Indiana with a guy who was in a band here, and was in Berkeley's one bluegrass band, the Redwood Canyon Ramblers. Very hard to say more than once. Hard to say once. Maine Smith, and I drove. He was at school at Indiana University, IU there, which is, you know, just like less than 50 miles from Bean Blossom, from Bill Monroe's park, Country Music Park, in a little town called Bean Blossom. This is before there were any festivals. And so I'd already been there and done that whole thing in '63, the year before.
But at the same time, I'd love to hear your early experiences. I mean, hearing, you know, your roots and how you started, and then eventually how, you know, Jerry got into the picture and that relationship. I mean, that's sort of what I was asking about, was like, you know, ask about your first few experiences with Jerry, like both personally and musically. Like,
Right.
what was the first time you guys played together? Like, what was that like, sort of thing? And what are any
Yeah.
stories you may have about Jerry in general, just his wonderful personality and whatnot?
Oh yeah, all that. Um, Actually, I've never really quite remembered if we played that day that he came into, he and Nelson actually were together, and they came into the campus music shop. See, they had, just to go back a little bit further, they had the Black Mountain Boys were already going, right? I didn't know anything about it. They were playing. Eric Thompson was their guitar player. Eric Thompson is a guy, he's still around here. He still lives in Berkeley. And Eric and Susie, and I don't know if you know who.
Yep.
Eric and Susie they play Cajun, they play all kinds of stuff. They're very popular players, old time and some bluegrass. And so what happened is that Eric had kind of quit the band or just left because he was following a girlfriend, and he went to the East Coast and chasing this girl, and sorry, and Jerry and David walked into the campus music shop where I was working. This was probably it could have been late 63. I don't know whether Heather was already born yet or not. She was born in December of 63. And they may have come in there, it might have been right around New Year's time, because there was that, I mean, she was born and he was kind of at home with that. But then by the time we did decide to take the trip, it was only May. So anyway, so he was around. They had been playing Black Mountain Boys with Eric they were playing it, Jerry's regular venue, the Top of the Tangent.
Yeah.
So they were playing at the Tangent. So I heard later, I didn't know anything about all this until I met them, and they walked into the shop and they said, "We lost our guitar player. We heard you're a bluegrass guitar player. We want you to join our band." Or it was more like, "You're gonna join our."
I believe that more, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, yeah. And you're gonna be our new guitar player. Anyway, so I started, I don't remember whether we actually played any that day. We must have played a few tunes in the shop there. I just don't know. I don't remember. The only thing is I don't remember. I have a pretty clear memory of them walking in, and I don't remember them hefting their instruments. Now, there were a few instruments on the wall. Campbell's shop, campus music shop, was not like Lundberg's. You've probably heard of Lundberg's, where Bob Weir, a lot of people, Lundberg's is a shop where all these wonderful 1920s, 30s instruments were just like lining the walls. Campus music shop wasn't like that. He had a few sparse instruments around, some electric guitars, some stuff related more to country music, because he was kind of a country guy. But there may have been a banjo in the shop that I don't recall us playing that day. In fact, how did Jerry and David know I could fill that role? I think it was from listening to us on KPFA radio. I think that's what it was. And I asked Jerry about that. "Oh yeah, I heard you and Rick." Yeah, and I was playing guitar then, and Rick was the banjo player. And basically we were, basically what was happening is they were trying to steal me from the Pine Ridge Ramblers, and that wasn't hard to do, because after I heard, I went down to Palo Alto, I think for the first time. I took the Greyhound bus down there, and I ended up taking the Greyhound bus down there like every weekend for a long time after that. But the very first time, I brought my guitar with me, and Jerry had his banjo, and Jerry was, as you know, all over the banjo, right? I mean, you couldn't stop him. He was unstoppable, The people in the Haight-Ashbury, when they had that house, they used to say, "Yeah, that banjo was right about at my ear level, at Jerry's height," and he wore his banjo a little bit high too. And that banjo, because some people wear them kind of low, he wore his banjo a little bit high, and he'd say, "I think it was right in my ear all the time. Will you stop that?" And he was just playing all the time. He didn't stop. He would just, when he got into the banjo, he got into it really heavily, and I'm sure he played it all the time, just like he played the guitar all the time later, because he had played the guitar before. But then when he got back into guitar, he played it a lot, practicing playing all day long. So there he was in Palo Alto playing that incredible banjo, and me and David, and I don't know, we just started being the band. I think the first time we actually played was at Jerry's house in the living room, with the baby there and Sarah. And then there was a gig at the Tangent. The first one came up that I played, and then it just went from there, But I think I've jumped ahead of some of the things you asked.
No, there's no jumping ahead. You're great. We're just, I love it all. there's
Yeah.
no, I don't know, there's an order, but that doesn't matter. And thank you.
Well,
This is interesting, great. And I want to hear this, Roots, because maybe people don't know that. And and this is the real stories. Like your history and how you met. And I mean, a question that my wife, and she's my co-producer on this, whatever that means. I'm not really a producer, and neither are we. She helps me do the research and asks me questions to do the work, and I sit there and do this. In your opinion, I mean, obviously Jerry was so otherworldly that way with everything he did. What do you believe, I mean, about the banjo or about bluegrass specifically? Maybe what do you think Jerry loved about it the most? Like, you said, like, he never put the banjo down. So I'm not a big, not familiar with the banjo in the same way I'm with the guitar or other instruments, but in your opinion, like, what do you think Jerry loves so much about it for yourself?
Well, in a way, it's the same question you asked before, which was, how did you guys, you were referring to me, but how did you guys get into this stuff, And then secondarily, why the banjo? Well, banjo, as far as the first question, why did we get in? I don't know. It's funny. Some of those people who really were heavily into what is often called old time music, which is not a very accurate expression, because old time music can mean honky tonk piano. All kinds of people call it old time music.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but that Appalachian, that based in Virginia, hate to mention Virginia right now, but anyway, based in Round Peak area of Virginia, up in the mountains, and there's a few communities there that nurtured a tremendous amount of music, and Jerry and Marsh and a few other people got really into that. And other people, well, Marsh is an example. Other people who got really into that didn't particularly take the bluegrass route. They kind of stuck with what they loved in the beginning. Why do you veer off? And I was into Roscoe Holcomb and Jesse Fuller and blues and old time singers, Appalachian singers. Now, why didn't I just stick with that? When I heard what happened, I went to 1961, Flatt and Scruggs came to Berkeley. They played at the Poly Ballroom up on the campus. Rick and I went to that. Rick Shub and I went to that. We wore little string ties. We dressed up just like them, which was crazy, and hats, string ties, and brought an album to have Earl Scruggs sign, and that show just totally blew my mind. It wasn't that I didn't still love the old stuff that I started with, and I'm sure that would be true for Jerry too. As a matter of fact, to jump way ahead, when we had the reconnection and we had the Jerry Garcia acoustic band, a lot of the songs we decided to do were from his early repertoire, from Mississippi John Hurt and from Elizabeth Cotton, and not bluegrass tunes specifically. We made a point of not being bluegrass. We talked about it. Let's not really use the banjo. We used a little bit of banjo, but let's just do old stuff, So he went back to that, and people often do go back to. But when I was 16, 17, or even no, actually, I was more like 14 and 15 when I first got into it. It just hit me really hard. And the banjo has a way of, with bluegrass people, there's just some people who, I mean, there's a lot of them who go for the fiddle, and I wish I had, because I really love fiddling, and I would often say I would trade everything I can do. If I could play the fiddle overnight and didn't have to work at it, I'd give up everything else just to be able to do it, because I like it that well. But you can't do that. It requires, a violin is probably the hardest instrument in the world. It's just difficult. It's physically torturing, and you have to get past all that. And then there's the music part of it. But some people just get bitten by the bug of the banjo. Butch Waller, for example, my friend Butch plays mandolin. He got bit by the mandolin. I don't think he ever wanted to play banjo, but some personalities, some people, I don't know. It's loud. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Girls like it. I don't know.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I mean, I've only ever played one string instrument in my life, and it was the viola. And that's because when I was that age, I was tall and big, and they're like, you can't use the violin. It's too short for you. Your hands are too big. So they gave me the viola. And up here, we had like a contest, like a Kiwanis festival kind of thing, whatever that means. And we came in second, and I never could read the music. I always had to write the G or the C above, and I couldn't really do the fingers properly. So I figured out how to use one finger and slide it lower and down. And
Hey,
so it was kind of cool. And that's like really my only ever experience was
that's
music
great.
modern musician.
You were Django on the violin. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
yeah, they
Django
pushed,
used two fingers.
yeah.
Django used two fingers here.
So
Actually
that,
two, and he was able to use the two that were frozen too a little bit. But anyway, yeah, actually playing a lot of this is a real digression, but a lot of the gypsy players, modern day gypsy guitar players, have reverted. Have a lot of them are playing like Django. They're realizing that to get that sound, you need to use one finger to get an arpeggio like that. You know,
wow.
if you use all your fingers, you're not going to get that sound.
So
So
I was ahead of myself, and I had
you
no
were
idea what
ahead
I
of
was
it.
doing.
You were
Yeah, because
definitely ahead of your
I'm
time.
very much I'm an efficiency person. I can't do it. Like if I show you, I can't do it. So I like, how can I make this? Oh, if you move it down the string, it has the same sound. And
There you
so,
go.
I figured that out and writing the notes above. So it was kind of cool. So look, in a small
Yeah.
nutshell, I can relate like this much, but
Well,
just kind of cool that I can share that little bit of my experience with you. And
that's enough.
hear a professional's take on it. That's kind of cool for me, actually.
You probably know that there's a million banjo jokes. Banjo jokes are a dime a dozen, right? But I've been told that the viola is the one that gets the jokes in the classical world. Did you know that?
No, I
Or
did not know
if
that.
you maybe didn't stay with it long enough, I've been told that the viola is the banjo of chamber music. You know,
Interesting.
well, you're a viola player, huh? So,
Yeah, I did not. I didn't know.
oh,
Maybe this was like grade school, like grade 3, 4, 5. Maybe that was it. And I never picked it up ever again. But yeah, because you're in music class, you got to do something. You got to have an instrument. And you're too tall. Take this one. And okay. And I was like the only viola player, I believe, at the time. I love the cello. I love the bass. I love the lower register. But the viola was kind of in between because we didn't have the A string or the E, but we had the G, right? So we had a bit high, but not as much of a more low, but not as high. So that was very fascinating for me too. And again, this is wow.
We were similar. I really wanted to play the cello when I was just a kid like that. I loved the sound of the cello and the low register.
Yes.
Later, the viola da gamba has that beautiful low register sound in chamber music. And viola would have been possible too, but I didn't do that. And I wanted to play. I also, since I got into folk music and blues and stuff when I was pretty young, like 11 and 12. I wanted to play a guitar, and I wanted to play guitar in school. When they asked you, what you want to do, and they said, no, we don't have guitar, but we need a trombone player. So I was forced to play. Yeah, the orchestra, the school band was short a trombone, and the guy looked at my lip. He said, "Yeah, you could play trombone." So but I didn't. I never did learn to read music. I just played. I had a fairly quick ear, and I could copy what the guy next to me was playing.
That's
awesome. And I just
that's awesome.
So I still like trombone, but I've never touched it since I was 12 or something. But
that's interesting. Yeah. So hey, maybe hey, if the time comes again, you get bored, pick up the trombone again. But but this has been great because I got a question here that actually comes from one of my channel users, which sort of touched on a little bit about what you were suggesting about, how songs were chosen. So let me his name is Vinyl Animal. His name's Artie. First off, he wants to say, Sandy, greetings. He's also from Miami. He's a hometown boy, finds his bluegrass dreams. He says, having played with both Bill Monroe and Jerry Garcia, who obviously was a huge fan of Bill's music, is there anything you can share about how they both went about choosing their repertoire, or yourself even? How much input did other band members, including yourself, have in contributing songs to be played in a concert? Was Bill open to such suggestions? Thank you.
Well, that's a good question. Thanks. What was his first name again?
Art Bustamante from Miami.
Vinyl what?
Yeah, Vinyl Animal Productions is his YouTube channel name. That's his handle on the channel.
Vinyl Animal. That's good. Yeah, I'm one of those too. Even though behind me here, all you can see is CDs, and the vinyl is over there out of the camera range. And Jerry was a big vinyl collector. Actually, it's a pretty good question, and I would say very similar between the two of them. Very open to material ideas from band members and elsewhere. Bill was really that way, and Jerry, sure. When I first started playing in the Black Mountain Boys, I was kind of into this group called the Country Gentlemen, and they were a Washington D.C. band. and Jerry, I don't know if he'd really known about them, but after I gave him the records or whatever, he totally gobbled it up and was totally into them and started to play banjo like their banjo player. And I wanted to play guitar like their guitar player. And their repertoire, they had songs. Jerry got into a couple of their songs on his own, but then I also said there was a song called Two Little Boys, which I didn't really know Tiff at that time, but I knew Jerry had a brother, you know, and this is a song, this is an old Civil War song about two brothers who go off to war, and one of them's killed on a horse, and this long story saga, and Jerry liked that and got into that. We always sang Two Little Boys together. In fact, one of the last times I ever spoke with Jerry out in front of Front Street in his car, I said, you know, we should record that Two Little Boys sometime. This is long after the Jerry Garcia acoustic band. He said, you got it. We got to do that. And of course, it never happened because that was pretty late in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say just about equal. Bill, remember one time at his park at Bean Blossom there, again, before the festivals, was in between sets, and he was out in the side yard, and there was a guy named Peter Aceves was his original name, but he changed it. Now I can't think of the name he changed it to. Another Latino name, maybe his original name. I'm not sure why. But anyway, he was kind of a Bob Dylan-esque folk guy. I think he may have written songs, and he was very, very, very much in that. I don't want to say he was like Dylan, but he was at the same time. He was one of those kind of guys, you know, singer, songwriter, very good guitar player. He was out there in the side yard, and it wasn't a place where people were playing, but he had his guitar out there, and he was singing Keep Your Hand on the Plow, Hold On, which is an old gospel song. And Bill, dressed in his stage clothes and everything, was just standing there watching, and he would always watch people who played and often join in with people who were picking out in the field there at Bean Blossom. But he didn't play this time, but he watched him, and he talked to him afterwards and said he wanted to get the words to that, and he wanted to start singing that. This is a guy not even in the band, he never even knew who he was. So Bill was wide open for ideas and songs wherever he might find them. Certainly Jerry, yeah. But Jerry, there wasn't much you could show Jerry that he didn't already know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you. That's really good insight. I mean, and then you basically touched on it a little bit, but so then how did the Jerry Garcia acoustic band come along? Obviously you were still probably friends over the years, but you know, the Grateful Dead, the Jerry Garcia band's going on, and they're like in full force by this time. So like, how did that, you know, how did that come back around? Was it Jerry's, you know, wanting to play that music again, reconnecting with you or yourself, or how, so, and what was that experience like when that eventually came back around? Because you know, you guys had a bunch of tours together.
It was a great experience. Well, I wish we'd done a bunch. We just did a few, but some things came along and kind of circumvented or intervened or whatever. But you know, let's see. In 1986, the year Jerry had his diabetic coma, I lived in Japan for most of 1986. That's a whole other story. I have a long connection with Japan and Japanese culture. And I was there in 1986, and I knew a few deadheads over there. I already had met a few Japanese deadheads, and one of them told me, a woman named Yuko, who I still know. Yuko told me that she'd heard Jerry was in the hospital, and I, you know, what happened, and I didn't know much about it. So I got in touch with somebody back there and found out a sketch of what had happened, and I was, you know, very concerned about it, and I wasn't completely ready to come back. I was planning to stay another month or two at that point, but I did come back. I just wanting to check in with Jerry was part of it. Yeah, I was kind of ready to come back anyway, but so I got in touch with them after getting back and talked to Mountain Girl on the phone, and she said, "Well, your timing, Jerry was just released from the hospital. You know, he's here at home, and I think it'd be great if you and David came over and you know, bring your instruments and play a little bit, see if Jerry can play, because he was in that time when he had just started a few days earlier, I think, working with Merle, to get his music chops back and guitar. And,
Tony touched upon that in our conversation a little bit too. Tony was right there. But
I'm sure he did. Yeah. So we went over there. She invited us for dinner. Went over there and she served a big dinner, and the girls were all there. And so let's play, let's pick. You know, Jerry Jerry first got the banjo out, and because we figured we'd probably just be the Black Mountain Boys again. You know, it's just we'd be a. I mean, we weren't thinking about a band or anything. We
No,
just
just
thinking
reminiscing. You're in the moment,
well,
just having fun.
well,
yeah.
I mean, that night, you know, let's be the Black Mountain Boys again. You know, Jerry played the guitar or played the banjo, and he did play the banjo for most of the night, and was remarkably together on it. And the thing that really blew me away is that he remembered the words to songs that we used to forget way back then. There's this one song, the Stanley Brothers song called Little Glass of Wine. It's got about 5 verses, and it's hard. It was always hard for us to remember the order of those verses, or even the verses themselves. Even back then when we were, 17 and 19 or whatever. But that night after dinner, when we were in the living room at Jerry's place, he remembered them all in the right order. I don't know what happened. Yeah, it was just like bizarre. So that's how that came back together again. And then we were over. I think it was maybe a different time. We were doing the same thing, playing a little bit. Oh yeah, we played the Thanksgiving party, Grateful Dead Thanksgiving party at the log cabin. There's a gnuTUBE.
Well, actually, I spoke with Susanna Millman, and she did some of the photography for that, so I got to see that firsthand knowledge of that as well.
Okay. Was she there at the log cabin that night?
I believe so. Yeah, because she has the footage. Yep. There are some pictures from that. Yeah.
Probably so. Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of people there who weren't necessarily in the office staff at that time, like Dan Healy was there, But Jerry said at one point, either there or at his house, I remember him saying, "Hey, we could make some folding money with this." And, okay. so whatever, if you want to, And so it was some weeks after that, maybe not very long, I got a call from Jerry, and he said, "I don't know if there's any money here," but he said, "but I'm playing this artist benefit, poster artist benefit. You know those guys who were on hard times in one way or another and needed some money put together." And so Bill Graham would put on this little thing at the Fillmore, poster artist benefit, And Jerry was just going to do it with John Kahn, and who I didn't know yet at the time. And he said, "Why don't you and David come and we'll just do it. We'll just do it, the 4 of us." Okay, no rehearsal, no nothing, just show up, So we did that, and that was really the first time we played out anywhere with the 4 of us. We didn't know we were going to do that. And you probably heard that story. David Nelson tells it a lot about Bill Graham came running in the back room afterwards and saying, "I got to do something with this. That's the roots of your music." Telling Jerry, "That's the roots of your music. I want to do something with this." And Jerry, who was never short on quick retorts and fast on the uptake, said, "Hey, well, take us to Broadway, Bill." And as David tells the story, Bill Graham walked out of the back room scratching his head saying, "Broadway, Broadway." And I don't know, I didn't see Bill do that, but it makes a good story.
Yeah, for sure. And the rest is history, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And then we did get together a few more times before the Broadway thing happened, but that art benefit was the first time.
Very cool. And I remember you mentioning to me once, I think it was in an email somewhere, where it was only supposed to be without a drummer. And then I believe David Kemper at some point became part of it. And then when you guys did another tour afterwards, it was without the drummer. I mean, again, no big deal. Just wanted to recap that for a second, because I thought that was very interesting.
True. Yeah, well, I think when we played the Stanford, that Palo Alto gig at, what's the name of that place there that everybody goes to? Anyway. Huh? No, not I mean, outdoors. It was out in Stanford. Frost.
The Frost Amphitheater.
And when we played there, I think we just played a quartet, even though Kemper was probably there, because I think he was there to play with the, the Jerry Garcia band, JGB. But he didn't play with us there, and a couple of other ones. And we kind of were thinking of it as a more open, old-timey sound without having the rigid timekeeping of a drum.
Yeah.
But what happened was, I think at the Broadway, when we were doing the Broadway thing did happen. And that, in answer to your question, what was it like to do that? That was just a gig of a lifetime. For me, the experience of a lifetime. For Jerry, it was, he was pretty accustomed to playing real nice rooms and big places and all that. But this room was like, the Luntfontein Theater was, you didn't even hardly needed a sound system. I think Carnegie Hall is probably like that. So acoustically perfect, wonderful place. But I don't know, David Kemper just sort of, I remember he walked to the back of the stage when we were just getting started and the curtain was about to go up, and he just sort of pointed at his drums, and Jerry said something, Jerry made a motion like, yeah, go ahead. And so he kind of invited himself on. And then from that point on, he kept doing it. And it was okay. We like the sound with the drums, you know. It kind of, it tightens things up in some ways, that's in ways that are good. And then it also removes some of the looseness that I like of a non-drum situation, but it was good.
Yeah, you do with what you got to do, right? But then again, you have the opportunity to do without that after a while. So, you know, you still got that experience of, you know, the free flowingness of it as well.
Yeah, both of them.
All right, I've got Brian Harrell, another question on my channel come out here. He's actually, can I just touch on one other thing quickly, because I know we're starting talking about this. Is it true that you introduced Jerry to David Grisman?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I believe at a country music venue in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that is true. Because I'd met him the year before in '63 in New York in Washington Square, and did some playing with him. Knew how deeply into Bill Monroe he was at that time, and Frank Wakefield, and what a, you know, incredible mandolin player he was even then at that age. And of course his age, you realize Jerry's a little bit older than me, and Grisman is too. And so they're probably, I don't know. See, Jerry was born in '42, I think it was. Grisman might have been 43 or something like that, but they're close, you know, closer.
Yeah.
And yeah, they hit it off pretty well. But I already knew what he could do and who he was. And yeah, I remember he was. It's a pretty vague memory, but I remember seeing him out there in the field at Sunset Park and taking Jerry over there and saying, oh, "This is, yeah, I did introduce them." Yeah, it's my fault.
No, hey, your fault. We're also honored for that. I mean, there's so many.
I'm just
awesome
kidding.
No, I know you are, but there's just so many awesome things that have come from all the different interactions with Jerry and whomever, for that matter. I mean, you know, even with early days of Jerry Garcia band with Nicky Hopkins, or you know, any of the other keyboardists he played with in those earlier years that, you know, you just wow. And then, you know, obviously he settled in on a bunch of different ones. But it seems even with all the bands, Jerry was always, you know, working through keyboard players. Love that specific, you know, addition to his sound or whatnot. And so that's, you know.
Who's that one he had? Ozzy Allers.
Ozzy Allers, David Ozzy Allers, yeah, 79, 80.
Boy, I love some of this stuff. He's a wild player, and I'm really a big fan of the JGB at various times, at all times actually. And I got to see them live a lot. Obviously, we shared the Broadway thing with them. I got to see them every night, but I never saw the early JGB bands, and I wish I had. I've really listened to a lot of those recordings with Ozzy Allers and some of the other ones. You know, Jerry, I'll just say this. This is maybe not part of that any question, but Jerry, and this is certainly true with Melvin, and to some extent, you know, other ones too. I guess I don't know if you could say it about Merle. Merle was a strong player, and he was. You know, you heard a lot of Merle when you heard Jerry and Merle. You heard a lot of sorry, I just said his name a second ago. Melvin. You heard a lot of Melvin too, but Melvin was a beautiful backup player. You know, that's what Jerry first flashed on him, was that, as he called it, those wonderful little things he plays, or something like that. Jerry called it. He just, you know, has a way of complimenting, and that's with an E, of course. Anything you would do, and certainly anything Jerry would do. Melvin was just right there with a beautiful chord behind it, you know. Yeah. But Jerry has a way of, you know, being the primary soloist in almost any situation. You know, he's gonna, you know, if nobody else jumps in, he'll be right there. He's ready to solo anytime, right? But with Ozzy Allers, and I think maybe there were a couple of others, they just climbed all over it, you know, and Jerry backed off, and it was a great interaction. I mean, I just love hearing it when somebody kind of comes up against him, and then he does stuff, and then he'll give him space and all that. I like that, you know. I agree.
I think, and I've always said, I think in a way Ozzy subconsciously pushed Jerry harder, because Jerry was listening and was so enamored with what was going on. It's like he had to answer it. And it was like, wow. And you can, in those 79, 80 years of Jerry, it's like a quartet, obviously. And it's like, obviously, the quartets before. But I actually call it pocket Jerry. It's between Merle and Melvin. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, wow, there's just something different going on there because
That's
you know
interesting.
before Ozzy it was more bluesy, jazzy obviously more so.
Right.
And after
Right.
that, it melded becomes a bit more gospel or more Motown, and it kind of takes a different leg of its own, or you know, more
Definitely.
Americana, even some Canadiana with the Bruce Coburn and you know some
Hmm.
of the more Canadians in there. But it's like
Yeah.
we call it jukebox Jerry. But I
Ah,
find with those Ozzy years, it was just such a
good.
different beast, and you can almost hear the rippingness. And then if you take that over to the Grateful Dead, actually, in
Right.
those years too, that's right where you know Brett was transitioning in, Keith was transitioning out. There's a certain different feel there as well. That and so I'm
Absolutely.
so glad you brought that up about Ozzy Ellers because it's
Yeah.
something that I've
Well,
actually noticed and brought up with my audience as well, or the
hmm
audience.
I like those terms you have for intermediate Jerry experience. Well, you know, I want to say something about Keith too, because Keith, there were times when Keith was, this thing keeps buzzing on my
You're a
computer.
busy
Uh,
guy.
no. It's not that. It's not anybody. It's something like, what does it say? Oh, it's just news clips or
Oh,
something
so
like that.
notifications on the computer, you're just getting notified. I
Yeah.
got it. Gotcha.
I think I'd like to be able to defeat those. I don't know how to do that.
That'll be our next conversation. I'll take that.
Okay, yeah. I don't need any news. I've got enough news. Um, you know, when Keith was having a great night, which happens sometimes when especially when he was playing, well, he was almost always playing a real piano because that's all he could really relate to is the beautiful sound of a real piano. There were some times too there where he was also a wonderful backup
Mm,
player. He was, you know, extremely complimentary player, but he had a great sensibility for some, especially again, some of the gospel songs when they were in the JGB, when they were doing some of the things that he and Donna brought to the band, you know,
yes.
brought to the JGB. But even in the Grateful Dead, sometimes Keith would just lay into those heavy chords on the piano and it would be up there in the mix pretty well. And you could tell that Jerry was really relating to that too. He really, you know, I don't want to say backed off, but he did some, but he worked with it. You know, he worked so beautifully with Keith's semi-classical, you know, these very rich, lush chords that he would
Yeah.
play, and chord melody. You know, he was a master of chord melody, which is a thing, for
You
sure.
could actually hear a lot of that in '75 because obviously No Dead, we had the Donnie and Keith band came out for a bit, right? The Keith and Donna band.
Yeah,
And then Jerry
right.
sat in with that. And that you
Yeah,
can kind of hear a bit more, you know, because Keith and Donna are more the forefront. So the music's different. And Jerry sort of not playing a back role to that, but playing a more complementary, but then also lead at the
exactly.
same time.
That's the
And
same.
you can kind of exactly you can kind of hear that there more so with the Grateful Dead. It's obviously you know Bobby Phil drums is a little more going on all the time. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that you have that same kind of you know perception of it as well because it's something that we talked about on my channel. Like there's only a few years of JGB with you know Donna and Keith. You know 77,
Right.
76, 77, 78 mostly a little bit of 79.
Uh-huh.
But that's not the big, you know, it's a different time and it's really an interesting period because you hear a different style in those couple years with Keith and Donna that you don't necessarily hear prior to that or after that. And it's
Right.
not good or bad. I'm not suggesting one way or the other.
No,
It's just
interesting.
exactly
Yeah.
it's the Jerry journey, right? If we could speak that again, knowing
Yeah.
that he came from a banjo, and you know, I even when Dennis or whoever was told me, I think it may have been Susanna. After a while, she actually said one of the things he didn't like he liked the least was actually playing an acoustic guitar
Mm-hmm.
until later with Grisman, where he really got into it more and said, you know, Dennis or Susanna said he really loved playing with Grisman, the acoustic guitar. But before that, it wasn't his favorite necessarily instrument. And so hearing all these different things and hearing your perspective on it's been really cool and interesting. And this is kind of why I wanted to have this because it's direct but indirect at the same time. And I kind of like
Sure.
that opinion of it,
Sure.
right?
That's by the way, of course, he played what we called almost acoustic guitar on in the JGAB. You know, um, he didn't play a real high quality guitar. He liked that guitar, but he played these. He played a fairly inexpensive Takamine guitar with the pickup on it and all that. Piezo pickup, I think they're called, style of the sound. And I thought, and a lot of people thought, it had a kind of a, I mean, I hate to use the word nasty, but it had a kind of a slightly
Grungy,
annoying,
yeah.
slightly annoying tone, and which he kind of liked, you know. I mean, he liked the snappy quality it had, you know. I don't think the action was adjusted all that well, you know, and he didn't have it set up all that well. Not like he set
raw.
up.
It was more raw for him, I think. More raw. He could just play it out, and he could.
But he liked. Right. He made a great sound out of it. You know, like when you hear him play lead guitar on Irene Goodnight or Goodnight Irene with us, you know, that thing is just snapping and it's buzzing and doing all kinds of, you know, what some people might call bad sounds, but he manages to make them, you know, it's like a collage. You know, he's an artist. You know, he's making an art piece. You know, and he uses whatever he's got. And the reason he liked that particular guitar, he told me, was that I can buy one anywhere. If somebody steals it or I drop it or something like that, I can get one off the wall in any music store in any town anywhere. I don't want to carry around a vintage, wonderful guitar. You know, he made that decision. Now with Grisman, I don't think Grisman would allow him to play that Takamine. You know, he put an expensive guitar in his hands right away and kept on doing that. You know, different kinds of expensive guitars.
Sure. Well, yeah, he wanted a little bit more different kind of sound that Grisman obviously wanted to curate, not necessarily in that word, but
no, that's a good word for it. And I think he was good at he knew what Jerry would, you know, he knew what Jerry would sound great on. An old Gibson L5 or whatever, a really good old Martin or whatever he put in his hands. You know, he's a collector. He's got all kinds of instruments. You know, but Jerry on his own would not have gone that direction. But yeah, sure. You know, he was acquiescent and back to the word we used or I used in the very beginning, a mediator. Somebody wanted him to do something or suggested he do this or that. Sure, I'll try that. You know, he was an easy guy. You know.
Seemed like it. I mean, he gave us all so much. I mean, regardless. I mean, almost without even trying. You know, him being him ended up, you know, with all these wonderful things.
Right.
Well,
and I was a big fan of the JGB when they would play you mentioned Keystone Palo Alto. They played Keystone Berkeley a lot too. Yep. And I was living there at that time and would pop in there every now and then and hear them. And I wasn't really familiar with the material that well. Now I'm much more familiar with the JGB, especially having heard them live a lot. I know the repertoire pretty well, but at that time I used to go to there and again just sort of stare at Jerry and listen to what was coming out of the guitar. Probably, and John was there. I didn't really notice what his bass style was like. I didn't know what that was like until I played with John. And such a remarkable. I didn't really know what Jerry saw in him or was attracted to in his style, you know, because I thought he was playing, in those days, I used to think, well, he's kind of like playing, it's as if he's playing a lead guitar. And people say that about, you ever heard anybody say that about Phil Lesh? I've heard that said. It sounds like he's playing a lot of lead guitar. Well, that's not what's going on. He's playing lots of counterpoint and all kinds of ideas. And, you know, it's not some guitar soloist. No, that's not what either Phil or John did. But John had a rhythmic sense that was really unique. I don't want to modify unique. It was just unique.
No, you're right. And hence where the conisms come from, right? Like we've got all the words, like anything with a C-O-N, we like contact. We're having, when we hear a bass solo during, we're having convulsions, you know? So we really taken that to a whole other level because, you know what I mean? It's like we're having con bombs, you know, and he's just going in them. There's been a few shows we brought Tony up and Tony was always about, I'm going to match exactly what he did. And it's like, and so there's a different allure there because of that. Absolutely. Even with the John acoustic shows. I mean, sometimes John just let go and let it rip and you heard a totally different dynamic than you necessarily would hear, you know, previously in a JGB show per se. And so very interesting, very cool, like concept and during hearing your perspective on it, because that's definitely how I felt about it for the most part.
You said the word concept.
Yes, there we go. There we go. It's a contest.
He would play a note nobody else would think of. So, totally out of his imagination. You know, very, very complimentary musician. A big loss. Yeah, John or Jerry, and then John. Jeez.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and those two again. I mean, almost more of a connection in some ways. Because, you know, I mean, I've obviously heard the stories that were, you know, Jerry considered, you know, JGB his fun. And, you know, over time, I guess the Grateful Dead became sort of a job, you know what I mean? And that relationship with the different musicians. And that's sort of the stories I've heard over time. Question from Brian Hill, just to pivot a little bit. I've got another question here. He says, great opportunity to me. Many thanks, Sandy. What a pleasure and thanks for all your contributions. What advice or approach to learning how to play and create music provided the best breakthroughs or advancements in your playing? So again, what advice or approach to learning how to play and create music provided the best breakthroughs in your advancement in your playing? And who gave the advice, or how was the knowledge acquired?
Boy, that's not an easy one. I'm trying to understand exactly where it comes from, or where it wants to go. I mean, maybe could you ask it again? I'll see if I can.
What advice or approach to learning how to play and create music provided the best breakthroughs or advancement in your playing?
You know, it kind of presupposes maybe a studiousness that maybe I don't have or never had. Maybe, I'm not sure. You know, what I used to give banjo lessons once in a while, and what I always told students was the most important thing is listening. Get it in your head, in your body. Listen a lot. You know, that's probably more important than even playing, practicing. If I had to say one was more important, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to say playing is important because that's what you're pointed to. But listening for as far as the learning thing, I just was just. I mean, I don't really know music technically that well. I don't. I'm not a you know, an educated music person, but I have done a lot of listening. You know, so I think probably I'm not sure if I know the term to use for his question. The biggest thing is just to get it inside of you. I think, you know, eventually
feel it, embody it first, and then let it expand from there, kind of thing.
Yeah, as I recently heard somebody say, if you play this stuff long enough, some of it's bound to leak out. You know, or if you listen to this stuff long enough, some of it's bound to leak out. You know, I don't know if I'm getting to the root of
it's okay.
Yeah, but that's an interesting. Maybe he's thinking a little more technically.
Possibly.
You know, certainly. I mean, in the realm of playing a lot. What do? You know, playing is something. Unless you're learning sheet music or written music, which is something Jerry did get into eventually. You know, through well, yeah, at the time he started learning again.
With Merle, yeah, in '86.
With Merle, yeah, not Melvin, with Merle, yeah. Merle got him into official music a little more, you know. But I think what we used to talk about, things like when you're playing, you know, just improvising, you'll do something you hear yourself do something you hadn't done before, or you don't really know what it is. So then take that and work with it. Just learning. So you're learning from yourself, basically. You know,
and that's the second question, was who gave the advice, or how was the knowledge acquired? And so in this situation, because you were the player more than the educated learner that way, regardless, right? It was more trial and error, learn, play. What did you like? How did it make you feel? Build on that, take away from that sort of thing, correct, right? So more natural, raw, sort of like Jerry, in terms of, you know, where I have friends that are musicians, obviously, and, you know, they studied it in school, and then from there it comes out, or that may even, you know, guide how they write music, because they're using their education as opposed to, or feeling as their basis, versus it coming just from a place of passion, or just playing it out and figuring out what works. Right. So I'm not saying that doesn't occur in that process, but there's obviously a bit of a different way when it's sort of, you know, organic. Let's call it organic, as opposed to it being a structured learning thing where you're trying to incorporate that into everything, versus let's just play, see what happens.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Something new.
Yeah. But also pay attention. It's let's just play, but not completely. I mean, you can go completely, you know, just play and not even really pay much attention to what you're doing. But if you want to progress in that particular improvisational way, I think it's important to, you know, especially if you hear yourself doing, or you see yourself doing something that you kind of like, you didn't plan on it, you don't really know where this is coming from, but if I can do that, maybe I can do this, and maybe I can do that. How about if I do it in this key? And you know, you're teaching yourself from what you're doing. But there's something else to say, which is, again, back to the listening, but also there's a visual component. And back in those days, we used to, I mean, in the South, they call it finger watching. You know, you get a lot of, in fact, a lot of old time musicians didn't like people to watch their, I've only heard about this. They would turn their back, fiddlers would turn their back. And I've seen little bits of this and try to keep because it's their style they had figured out. They didn't want people to see what they were doing, you know. But when I came along, by the time I came along in the 60s, everybody was, I mean, there was some restriction about taping. Now some of the bluegrass band leaders didn't like to get taped. Bill Monroe was fine with it. He never objected to being taped. But Jimmy Martin, I don't know if you ever heard that name, he was one who didn't particularly want to be taped. And maybe the Osborne brothers weren't crazy about it either. Our record company told us, you know, it's better to not have people tape your stuff. And I don't know why, but Bill was totally open to it. But watching, yeah. But watching is, you know, one of the reasons we liked to go to clubs. In fact, that first night when Jerry and I saw the Osborne brothers at that little club in Ohio, in Dayton, you know, we get up there really close to the stage, up close to these guys and watch them. What is Bobby actually doing on the mandolin? What is Sonny actually doing? You know, it's one of the reasons you wanted to go see these people. And there was no audience. I mean, we were the audience. There were like, maybe there were 9 or 10 other people in there that night, you know, but we could watch them really clearly. And watching other musicians not in performance situations too. If you're jamming together with people, you'll watch what their fingers are doing, you know, and that's a way of learning too, you know, but it's so visual. It's like, and now of course with videos and YouTube, and, you know, people have the opportunity to, you know, expand that window and watch really close. You can watch what Jerry's doing, you know. I was watching a, do you know that little trick that Jerry used to do where he'd hold the pick in his stump?
No.
And he, you know, have you ever watched him play finger picking, and then suddenly he changes and he starts flat picking?
Yes.
Without picking.
Yeah.
So what it was is he'd keep his flat pick stuck in there. It was just in there. And he was expert at dropping it. He would drop it and he'd catch it with his finger. And in an instant, he would switch between finger style and flat pick style. And I never saw this live, but I saw it on YouTube. I saw it was a concert where, you know, oh, that's how he's doing that. You know, it's amazing. I just never knew. He was so deft at it. I mean, he did it so imperceptibly that you could hardly see it. But really with the video, you go back 10 times and watch it. Oh, is he really doing that? But live, you can't. It's too fast, and he was so good at it.
Really cool. And that's interesting because I love watching the fingers going like that. For me, is as much as I enjoy the music takes me away. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes music can be a little take me to a place where, okay, I've had enough. Like, but that extra added visual of the player going, and that enamors me in a different way. And then I connect the finger playing and the movement with the sound, and all of a sudden I'm even more engaged with it. For other people, it's just they're just happy with the music, or they like the lyrics, or something else brings them in. For me, I really love that. I'd rather see, you know, a keyboardist go crazy, or a guitarist or a drummer go nuts, than just a standard, you know, beat or whatever, because that, to me, not being a musician myself, and not really having that talent at all, it really opens my eyes, and it really excites me in some ways. So, and then to hear and feel the music that comes out of that is also something that's really amazing to me, which is, you know, sort of why the acoustic music. I mean, for myself personally, I mean, with my friends that are local musicians and Jerry, obviously, in the acoustic band, it's developed a much more feel and understanding for this kind of music, where I'd rather go see a bluegrass band or player that I've never seen before, because I might learn something new, than see a band I've seen before, because I've already kind of seen it and, you know, what I know what to expect. And so it's kind of changed my perception a bit of, you know, how I kind of consume music now, and that I really enjoy that, you know, more dynamics, more layers, you know, and that sort of, you know, to that point about the different things with the, you know, Jerry, even with the banjo, or yourself, you know, the different styles and the different things that those fingers sometimes for me become part of that experience for me, and watching that and seeing the connection between those two things. Really cool.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I was pretty young, I used to watch the bands around here, or what few that we had around here. And there was one musician named Pete Berg, and Pete played in, he was an early Redwood Canyon Ramblers member, but he also played in a group called the Ridge Runners. And he was a banjo. Well, he played banjo, but he plays everything. He's a Latin jazz guitarist, I think, or 10, 20 years ago he was. He's always reinventing himself. But when he was playing banjo around here, he had the most elegant left hand. He had the least amount of motion in his left hand. It was like almost wasn't moving. The fingers were almost not moving. How does he do that? And I used to watch him and think, and I think I picked up a little of that. I think you can, I'm not like him, but I'm actually left-handed. I don't play left-handed, but my left hand is stronger than my right hand.
Me too.
And, okay. Well, there you go. And you did play music. You were a viola, so you do have a little tiny bit of connection to that when that watching thing. You've done it, so you kind of know how to watch it too.
Yeah.
Let me remind you. But I picked that up from Pete, and Jerry told me that he got it from me. I don't know if that's true or not. He never told anybody else that, probably, but
well, I'm
he
sure
told me he got it.
I believe that.
He told me he got a few things from my teenage guitar playing, and that was one of them. You know, he liked my playing back then, and I think he could see I'd picked up a couple of technical things like this very economical left-hand motion. And Jerry got it right away and became a master at economical motion with both sides, left and right.
No doubt. Letting it know.
The amount he could do with that flat pick, just
amazing.
Totally unbelievable. Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Well, I've got a couple more, like just a couple things I want to touch on. So this is a weird question, not weird. It's my sound man, like not my sound man, but he's for the bands I work with locally. He helps me with my channel in terms of when I do live streams, he makes the streams better. He has the best question ever. He asks it every single time to every single person I interview or have a conversation with. He wants to know, what are your preferred pizza toppings?
Somebody used to ask Clarence White whether he slept in the nude.
I'm not asking you that.
No. You know what's funny about me and pizza? Okay, I don't prefer the West Coast pineapple, everything sort of kind of pizza. But I'm an old ex-macro. I used to follow macrobiotics pretty much, and I don't much anymore. I'm a what do you call it? When you slipped and slide it off. Anyway. But I don't care for white flour products very much. Oh. So pizza dough. Now, when I lived in Chico, California, there was a pizza place up there that was they made their crust out of about 50 to 60% whole wheat flour, and the rest was white flour, because white flour is a good foil for flavors. It doesn't have much flavor of its own. Whole wheat flour has a little more flavor, and it could interfere with a pizza. But they put just enough in there to make it really tasty, make the crust really tasty, and I could really get into that. As far as toppings, I mean, back then when I was living in Chico, I wasn't eating too much meat, so I was more into, or not too much cheese either. So I was eating more into. There's a thing called. What is it called? It's a French style. It's actually the French style of pizza. It's called pizzalitaire. It's a word that sounds a little like pizza, but it's a French word. Pizzalitaire. And the toppings are almost all vegetables.
Pizza from the earth, because pizza à la terre, and terre is earth in French, so that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
That makes kind of sense.
I'm not saying it right. I used to know it.
That's okay.
But it's basically what you end up with: roasted vegetables. And if you've got a cheese if you've got cheese under that, then there's that. But a lot of what you have is probably every kind of vegetable, any kind, brushed with a little olive oil, and garlic's on there, and plenty of flavor, and baked and roasted like that. But now, I mean, if I don't eat it very often because I really don't like eating white flour products. So I usually pass on pizza.
Fair enough.
I like any kind of pizza toppings. I don't think I'm omnivorous about pizza toppings. Maybe I don't have a favorite.
That's it. There's your answer. I practice mindfulness, and we're taught in mindfulness that no feeling is still a feeling. And not making a choice is still making a choice. Sure. So great answer. No, that's perfect. Well, that's it. It's a fun question.
It's a fun question. It's also not so much not making a choice, but being happy with any choice. There's nothing. I'm omnivorous, so there's nothing they can put in front of me that I wouldn't eat nowadays. Well, even back then I would eat a little bit, but not very much. But now I'd probably gobble up quite a bit. But But if somebody would make a pizza with, I think it used to be called pizza saladière. Yeah, pizza saladière. If there was this friend of mine who was Jacques Delangre, he made a wonderful pizza saladière, but he made his with 100% whole wheat flour, but it was whole wheat flour that he ground himself, and so it was very live. And it would, because if you're using whole grain flour and you grind it and you bake with it right then, it has a lot more life to it. And you can do natural levain. You can make a levain, it'll leaven by itself without yeast. You don't actually
the word leaven. Here we go. There we
levain.
go. Cooking tips with Sandy Rothman, ladies
Ah,
and gentlemen.
we could go there. Well, he asked about pizza toppings.
No,
Yeah,
it's great. It's perfect. No,
that's a great question, though.
It's great. Yeah, of course. Corey's the best. Corey's like 20 whatever years younger than me, and I love him like a brother. And he's actually in the band. It's a band called the Lizards. We're a Fish tribute band. A lot of the guys in the band. Corey's the youngest, but I actually feel Corey's the oldest. He just has that certain side to him where he's like always responsible, making sure no one's causing problems. And Corey's the best that way. He's like the old man with a young heart, and vice versa, whatever. But
a little bit like Jerry. We used to say it was such an unbelievable shame that Jerry only lived to 53, but then somebody would say, yeah, about 153.
Yeah,
because he was so mature in so many ways, And it goes back to, again, that idea of being the mediator type guy. He was always that way. He was so, he was just so ahead of himself, I mean, when we used to play at the Tangent, he was probably only 20 then. But have you ever heard his MC work that he would used to do? Have you heard live tapes?
No.
You heard live Black Mountain Boys tapes?
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. Okay.
He would talk in between songs, Well, the stuff he said was always, I mean, if you used it today, it would be like a script. It would be like somebody wrote a stand-up script for somebody, He was so on top of it all, very, very, and always able to see every point of view. And I can see why you said he was, that people used to talk to him for, well, if not marital issues, any issues that required care and thought and, mindfulness, basically,
That's absolutely. And
really
I feel like Jerry, in a way, embodied mindfulness without even really knowing what it was, because I mean, his playing in itself was so in the moment, which most music is anyways. But that ability to be in that moment, and for Jerry just to take it wherever based on so many variables that we've already covered, I mean, even yourself or whoever, that's sort of, it's just such a wonderful thing to hear, and I really appreciate that. So a couple things.
I gotta say he and I'll just stick this in, that he and Tiff were both nice Catholic boys from San Francisco. I mean, as long as you're going to talk about Jewish guys, I got to say, because there's a certain training that comes with the Catholic school education. I play with a couple of guys these days who were raised that way, and they're very thoughtful and kind, just naturally that way. I mean, I'm not saying
certain type of awareness.
Certain type of awareness. I'm not saying it didn't come from inside Jerry's heart and soul that he was probably born with, but I think he was raised to, and I think he learned something from those. I think you do learn something from those early educational experiences. Some of those sisters might have been hard on you as a kid, but it
frames something for sure. For sure, absolutely. You may not attach to it in certain ways, but you attach to it in other ways where it helps other parts of it. So maybe Jerry wasn't necessarily the most religious person, but those learnings and teachings may have helped with other things that he was doing every day, or his passion for music, or his commitment to being a certain way, which we obviously hear and feel every day in his music that's still around. So you're right.
But he was a little religious too. I mean, I always felt that he, I mean, I don't know if a commercial.
Well, he didn't speak about it as often, is what I'm suggesting.
He didn't proselytize at all, but he definitely, things he would say would come from something close to that, I think.
Yeah. And again, you would know better. You were his good friend, and you guys had a lot of history together, and especially at that point, so you'd have a little bit more knowledge in that as well.
He was probably closer to Santa Claus than Jesus, but he certainly was Jesus-like in some ways, But he loved Santa Claus, and he loved Christmas. It was one of his
Frankenstein too, and Frankenstein of all things, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, right. Well, he liked anything to be. He liked being scared, and that's something that came from childhood.
Yeah. So okay, I know that during the pandemic you haven't had a lot of chance to really play or get together with your boys or whomever. Do you have anything current for yourself that you want to mention or talk about? Anything upcoming?
Thanks.
And yeah, and how do people find you online? Like if someone needs to find you or get your music or download or shop or buy your stuff, this
You
is
know, they
about
used.
your promotion right now. So let's hear it, Sandy.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And as far as the latter part of that question, there used to be a website that Steve Marcus made for me. You know, Steve um, from Grateful Dead Tickets. And Steve made that, but I don't think it's online out there anymore. We decided it wasn't visually, artistically what I wanted. But I don't know. I don't have a place online to buy anything. I did for a while for this project that Brian Godchaux and I have together, the Banjo and Fiddle project. And I'll mention that. But the only way really to get it right now, I mean, I think elderly instruments in where are they, in Indiana? Oh, where? No, in Michigan. They're in Ann Arbor, something like that. They have copies of that record, of that CD of mine and Brian's. But the best way is just to email me. I'll send it to anybody.
Awesome.
I don't even know how much to ask for it, because we're not really trying to sell it anymore. We spent a lot of money on it, and we never sold much of it. And when time goes, after a certain amount of time goes by, you just kind of give stuff away,
Yeah.
or give me $10.
It becomes legacy. It becomes legacy at that point. You've already
Yeah.
kind of done what you
I've,
need to do. It's like, here, listen, take it.
I've given most of it away. I have a few other CDs too. Yeah, I wish there was a website. I should talk to somebody about that. I'm not good at doing web related stuff myself, but
We can talk. I can help.
well, great.
We'll circle
What was the
back after this. We'll circle back after this. We'll talk some emails, have some phone calls, and I'll see how I
Okay.
can help you any way I can.
But
Absolutely.
there was the first part of that I didn't respond to. What was it?
Just about any upcoming projects or tours.
Oh, that's it.
anything
Yeah,
planned.
yeah. We actually, you said we're not getting together. We didn't for the first COVID year, when everything was locked down, we didn't. But then when, and it wasn't even after the vaccine, but came a certain point, I guess about a year ago, when we just did, or maybe it was last March of this year, we did decide to start getting together again. So we actually play every week. We get together and play every week. And I really enjoy it. I mean, I was just talking with Butch about that the other day, about not having gigs. We're at this age. I mean, gigs are fun, and it's nice to be able to share music with people and do things out and all that. But also, we've really been enjoying just working on stuff.
Yeah.
We mostly work on 3-part harmony. We put a lot more time into singing than we do playing. We play, but singing is what we're really into a lot. And once again, that group, the Osborne Brothers, are a big inspiration for us. Their 3-part harmony is very special. We've been working on that and some other trio things. And yeah, we do a lot of that. We have a little bit of an issue right now because our dear guitar player, Bob Waller, Butch's brother, broke his shoulder the other day. He got pushed down by a real big dog in a dog park, and it broke his shoulder. And so he's going to be out of commission for a while. Yeah, surgery tomorrow. What a feel for Bob.
Wishing him good health and in healthy recovery and speedy recovery as well. And hopefully it all works out so you guys can get back to playing again as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you. But also I have my other thing, which is playing with Brian. We've been musical partners since about 1990 or so, when we made a CD together, and I still have copies of that too. Give a lot of those away. But we did this thing, I think in 2015, just banjo and fiddle, no other instruments, just duets between the two of us. And yeah, it's I still like it. I listen to tracks from it once in a while, and Brian does too. We still, it's pretty good if you can still like some of your old
Listening
stuff.
to yourself, yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, I actually like a few of the tracks quite a bit. So I'd send you one for sure, or anybody can get them. I mean, they're easy to get. Those I probably should say maybe $10 or something, because we're still trying to pay for all the work, all the money we spent on it not that many years ago. But my old CDs, I'll send them to anybody who sends me postage.
Yeah. So if anyone needs to reach out, just send me a note on my YouTube channel through
That'd be
comments,
great.
and I'm happy to send you Sandy's email so you can purchase or get any of his music from him, or find out if they do get to play again gigs where he may be in the future with his friends or with whomever, and you can go check him out and have a great time with that audience and have some bluegrass fun, man. I mean, that's what it's all about. And hopefully you can get back out and share the music as soon as possible. I know you're still having fun not doing that, but again, having a bit of that extra feeling inside of getting it out there, sharing it as well as making it.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping you get there sooner than later.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. We would like to.
Great. Now, the last segment I usually do, this is strictly from my wife, she's co-producer. When I was going to meet Dawn, I was like, I'm not an interview. I don't know what to do. And she came up with a bunch of questions as a sort of a break the ice to get me thinking. So maybe you've heard of the Inside the Actor Studio.
I've heard of, but don't know much.
Okay, well, at the end of the show, he used to ask a specific set of questions. So there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 of them. And they're quick ones, just like one answer questions, and that'll wrap up our conversation today.
I think I told you before. I think I told you before. I'm not really great at the real fast retort.
Oh, you'll love these ones. Trust me, you'll be okay. You'll be okay.
Okay.
Ready? Here we go. What is your favorite word?
I think maybe ha ha.
Perfect.
Those two words.
But there's a hyphen, so it's one.
Favorite word. Yeah, boy, I think I got too many favorite words. And I'm an old ex-proofreader and part-time editor. I got a lot of words I like.
Oh, okay.
A lot of words I like.
All right, so then what is your least favorite word?
Modifying the word unique, like when people say very unique. You can't do. No, that's not a least favorite word though. Yeah,
not irregardless, right? Not irregardless. Right?
Irregardless. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. Of course, we all grew up with that one.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we still don't like hearing it, but yeah, I don't have a single least favorite word. I don't think.
Hate.
Those are good questions. Oh, hate. Alfred Orage, a philosopher from the early 20th century, said, "Never fear to hate the odious." So that kind of changed my perspective on hate. I probably don't like it in any other way, but I'll take it in that way.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Well, I almost want to say what doesn't. I mean,
that's it.
I mean, everything, especially when you pull those separately. What are the three again? Spiritually,
either creatively, spiritually, or emotionally. Either all or one, it doesn't matter.
Creatively, I mean, it's whatever medium, is you're working with or is in front of me, Again, like Jerry and like a lot of other friends of ours here in the Bay Area, I had a kind of a fine arts background before I got into music. I thought I was going to go in the painter direction, and one of my big inspirations. Huh?
That question's coming in a second. Interesting.
One of my big inspirations in modern painting is a painter, is actually an East Coast painter, but lived on the West Coast, named David Park. And David Park is still my favorite painter. He passed away in 1960, so he's not living, but he's a modern. He's a painter of today. I could talk about Vuillard or Bonnard or somebody from a long time ago, or anybody else, but David Park. I mean, I'm sitting here just on the other side of my monitor is a David Park poster from a show at SF MoMA, and I look at that probably 10 times a day. I just can't say enough about David Park.
It makes you feel good. It makes you feel good.
Yeah. So that's my creatively, in terms of fine arts. Musically, creatively, it's I mean, can you be nearly infinite? I mean, it's like, I wouldn't know where to stop. Sure, Bill Monroe and Earl Scruggs and all these other names and Blind Lemon Jefferson. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, I like so much of everything,
That's great.
Muddy Waters. Yeah.
Okay, then what turns you off?
I think limitation, anybody or anything that seeks to, shut down all those qualities you just mentioned before.
That's great. That's great.
That would turn me off. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And so we got a few more. What is your favorite curse word?
Donald Trump. No. Favorite cuss word?
Is there one you notice yourself saying all the time? Like,
No, it's just shit.
Yeah, there you go. There it is. Oh shit.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, right.
What sound or noise do you love, or makes you just feel everything? What sound
or noise?
Is there a sound or noise that makes you feel like alive and great and wonderful? What's your favorite?
Well, I love the sound of snow falling, but we don't get that on the West Coast here, Can I tell you my least favorite sound?
That's actually next. What sound or noise do you not like?
A leaf blower.
Oh, wow.
I don't like the leaf blower. I don't like the concept of leaf blower. Leaf blowers suck. I mean, leaf blowers suck because they don't suck. They blow. They blow. You know, I mean, they should have a little bag and it should be collecting the leaves. Don't just move the leaves over to somebody else's yard. You know, I just don't like the concept, and I don't like the sound of it.
Well, it's like the worst concept in the world is grass.
Is what?
Grass.
Yeah.
We cut it. We nurture it for what? So it can, like it's like what are we doing with grass? Like what is this?
You don't see too much of it in Japan. A lot of rocks and stone,
Yeah,
and a lot of leaves. And
so much maintenance.
They leave the leaves there. They don't, you know, they don't have a problem with leaves.
No, I agree. Different culture, absolutely. So, what profession other than your own would you have liked to attempt?
What was the conjugation of that verb again?
What profession other than your own would you have liked to have attempted?
Would you have liked to have attempted?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I should probably say painting, because when I was a kid, I really wanted to be a painter, but I did a whole lot more drawing than I ever did painting. So I never got that far with painting. But I guess, yeah, to have pursued pursued art in a way that I didn't. I just took a big heavy left turn into music, and art just sort of went by. I still did some of it, and I can still draw something. But unlike Jerry, I never got back. Jerry got right back into it. Really back into it. Yeah, I guess that I could probably think of some other things, but not that fast.
All right, we got a couple more. What profession would you have liked not to have done?
I'd like not to have invented the leaf blower. Let's see.
Well, from a financial point of view, maybe, but not from the other point of view.
Well, there would be a lot of those too. There'd be a lot of those.
Right.
I kind of almost wouldn't know where to start.
Fair enough.
You know, I'm not crazy about corporate business, but if I'd found myself in that situation, and if it was something that I felt was worthwhile, I probably would have gone with it. But probably not. Probably not. I like smaller enterprises better than larger enterprises.
Great. All right, this one is kind of cool. I got this one's my favorite one of all the ones. If heaven exists, whatever that is to you, or what that means in a mainstream, whatever way, I'm not trying to push this anyway. What would you like to hear God or whomever's there to greet you say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That's the last question?
That's the last one.
That's good for a last question. Come on in, I guess.
Ah, beautiful. See, Dennis McNally, you know what his answer was? Where's my laminate?
Well, see, that's the kind of good, quick fast quip I just can't.
That's okay. No, this is great. No. I thank you. This is awesome.
That sure tells how important the laminate or the Old Grateful Dead ethos is for Dennis, and I understand that. Yeah. I think my buddy Rick Young might say something like that too. Where's my laminate? Yeah. Or actually, I already have my laminate. Can I use it? You know?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, unless you have anything else you want to mention or talk about, Sandy, I just want to say thank you for your time today. It's been great over the last, year or so, having these little small emails with you about whatever and
sure, anytime
and whatnot. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been awesome catching up with you, learning about you, hearing about some of your stories, where you've come from, and just being a part of that, and really jumping into this community a lot more and understanding it from a different angle. And I thank you for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
No, very much vice versa. I thank you for your interest in your time. And as far as my background and all that kind of stuff, about a year ago I started trying to write a memoir, and I have kind of stopped doing it, but I think it'll come back. I'm hoping if it does come back again, and if it ever comes somewhere where anybody interested can get it, then all those stories will be in there, or a bunch of them will,
Love it.
I'll send you a copy anyway.
I would love to. And if that does come around and you do get there, let me know, reach out. We can do another conversation about that and try to promote that. And I can put those links up on my channel and help you,
Oh,
get out there or sell or whatever. I'm happy to help in any way I can, Sandy. I really appreciate
nice,
your time.
very nice of you. Yeah, I'll take you up on the CV thing too. We'll figure out some way to get those mentioned someplace.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to be a mediator too. Like if it means I'll collect it and then send it to you, I'm happy to do it and be in the middleman and try to facilitate anything I can for you to get you out there, get your music, get your legacy going on forever. Cause it means a lot to me. And I appreciate your time today.
No, it's great of you, Dave. I really appreciate it. I'd like to come to Ontario sometime.
Please. Yeah, we want you to come up. I got a beautiful home. You're more than welcome to stay with my wife and I. We don't have kids. We got a pretty decent sized home. And if you ever do want to get up here, please give me a call. I'm happy to take you on a tour, show you around, take you to some music, meet my friends. We actually have a guy here named Mark Thakaway. I call him Canadian Jerry because he sort of embodies it. I'll send you a couple of links of him playing on my YouTube channel.
I'd like to
hear it there a little bit too. But it's a really wonderful experience. And him and his friend, they now have a band called W.S. Dupree, which is sort of a fictional character, and they writing songs about that, and that's their new band. So a lot of synergies here that I would love to, if you do come, I'd love to introduce you to, and they'd love to meet you, obviously, with your history and whatnot. So please,
really cool.
Do not hesitate. Reach out to me anytime you need anything. I'm happy to pick my brain, give you suggestions, ideas, give you whatever I can. I'm happy to help, Sandy.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've corresponded with David Lemieux a little bit, and I happen to love Victoria, where he lives. I've been to that town a few times and just fell in love with it. When I was a kid, even, I just always loved Victoria. So maybe I'll start there, say hi to Dave, and then somehow figure out a way to get to further into Canada.
I've been to Victoria. If you go to Vancouver Island, go to Tofino.
Oh, okay.
Tofino's where you want to go. That's like the big long beaches, temperate rainforest behind you, waves. It's just a really special place. I mean, Victoria is the main city, a little bit south of that, but Tofino, I've been in this wonderful, wonderful place.
Must be great. Okay. All right.
Yeah, do yourself a favor, get up there if you can, as a bucket list item, and please and thank you. Reach out anytime, and thank you for your time again today, Sandy.
Thank you for yours. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.